And on today's show, we are asking the question, how should you respond when your daughter says she is your son? We've talked to Dr. Jennifer Bowens and Dr. Quentin Van Meter to get their professional perspectives on this issue. And now we're going to talk to someone for whom this issue is much more personal. KathyGrace Duncan is a woman who lived 11 years of her life identifying as a man. What did she learn? What would she say to a parent whose child says they are transgender? We're going to talk about that now. KathyGrace, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you.
So glad to have you. And to catch listeners up who may not be aware, just tell us a bit of your story.
Sure. So from a very young age, starting age 3 and 4, I had the desire to live as a man. I felt that I was born in the wrong body. I felt that I should have been a boy. And so I had that perspective growing up all through grade school, junior high, middle school, and high school. And finally, at the age of 19, after I graduated out of high school, at the age of 19, changed my name, started taking hormones, and started living as a man. And as you mentioned, I did that for 11 years.
KathyGrace, I want to just get some detail. What do you attribute that to? Anything that you now look back on, because again, that's very early, and we hear a lot of stories like this happening now. It seems much more common now. But as you reflect back on yourself as a 3 and a 4-year-old, what do you attribute that to?
Well, so now hindsight, I see where my dad was verbally and emotionally abusive to my mom. And so I looked at that, and then I saw my mom, how she was the victim of that abuse. And I saw her crumble underneath that. So that gave me the messages from my dad that women are weak, women are hated, and women are vulnerable. And if I'm a girl, that means I'm going to grow up and I could be treated like that. So that told me that that's not safe. And then also my little brother was born when I was 7 and he was adored. So I thought, you know what, to be a boy, I should be adored. So I have to be a boy. And then also between the ages of 10 and 12, I was sexually molested by a family member, which really cemented in women are weak, women are vulnerable, and women are hated. Because why else would I want to, why would I want to grow up and be like that? And it was not safe to be a woman, and I wanted to be safe. So with those, background and the rejection and the abandonment involved behind the scenes as well, that just told me that being a man was a much better choice than living as a woman for the rest of my life.
So you made that transition, you say, at about 19 years of age. You spent 11 years living as a man. What happened in the course of that 11 years?
So, I met a girl, dated, we were probably together, 5 or 6 years. And then when we broke up, I immediately went into a rebound relationship. And in this rebound relationship, I woke up one morning and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm my mom, or she's my mom and I'm my dad. And I'm like, I don't want to be that man. So I broke up with her. And in breaking up with her, I was already involved in the church, in the orchestra. So I decided to get more involved in church. And in doing so, one night on my way to orchestra, the Lord called to me and he said, will you now? Will you now? And I take a look at my life and I'm like, I have nothing to lose. I should do this. So I said, yes, Lord, I will. And from that point, for the next 4 years, the Lord continually wooed me, and I got more involved at church, more involved in ministry. And I really just came to love the Lord. And serving, I led a men's Bible study. I was serving in the junior high ministry. I had a small group of boys. I was in the college age group. I was in the single adults group. Everywhere I thought the Lord would be, that's where I was. And then at the 11-year mark, the Lord had brought some spiritual parents, and the spiritual dad, I didn't know it at the time, but the Lord was really using him to work on my dad's stuff, on my dad issues. And I had just come home from a junior high retreat, and he came up to me and he said, can I talk to you? And I'm like, yeah. So I followed him. And in the midst of that question, I'm like, I think I'm going to be confronted. So I followed him back behind the sanctuary, and there was the pastor of the college age group who I knew. He was my friend. And when I entered the room, I was like, oh yeah, here we go. I'm going to be confronted. So I sat down, and Dave asked me, the pastor asked me, he said, we're hearing these rumors about you. I just want to know, who are you? Who are you really? And at that moment, I spoke the truth, and I said, I'm a woman living as a man. Now, prior to that, I would always claim that I was a man who used to be a woman. But when I proclaimed the truth, the Holy Spirit blew into me. It was like this. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? And I saw that I needed to go back to being the woman that God created me to be. And I love the Lord so much that I wanted that relationship that I had longed for. And I realized that was the thing I needed to do. So that night I started the journey out of living as a man and going back to being the woman that God created me to be. And that was, I'm coming up on 30 years of walking that out. The first 5 years was hard, because it was figuring out, how do I embrace being a woman? What does the Lord say about being a woman? Working through the rejection, looking at the truth of that, looking at what that said to me, looking at the molestation. Sexual abuse carries some pretty heavy hitting lies about who you are and that it's your fault. And, you deserve this, you wanted this. As well as looking at all the degrading comments that my dad said that I took on as they were true about me, though he was saying them to my mom. I thought, these have to be true of me because I'm a girl. So working through those lies, putting in the truth, still seeking the Lord. And then, it was like the inside needed to change first, because at the very beginning, I begged the Lord over and over and over, Lord, you're calling me to be this woman. Help me to be this woman. Do you see all these changes that need to happen? And I was talking about physical changes, getting rid of the beard and, having my hair grow back and I had my whole laundry list. And finally the Lord spoke into that. And he said, I don't care about those things. I'm like, okay, but you are calling me back to being this woman. You don't care about these things? And he's like, no, I'm after your heart. And so once I realized that, then it was like, okay, I need to figure out how to continue to surrender my heart. And those things that rise to the top means that the Lord isn't the Lord in there. So how do I get the Lord over those things? So for the first 5 years, it was a constant state of surrender and embracing who he said I was and who I needed to go back to being.
This is such a powerful story, and I know there's so much there that unfortunately today we don't have the time to get into all of that. But when you tell your story now, given how hot this issue is culturally and politically, what kind of response do you get from those who continue to maintain a transgender identity?
Well, I understand it. There's a fierceness in there. They think that they need to fight for who they are, but they really don't understand that they're deceived. And the deception runs deep. I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. I believed those lies saying that it's safer to be a man. Being a woman is not safe. I bought that. And then anybody who came against that, they were my enemy automatically. They were my enemy. Parents, they were my enemy. Friends, they were my enemy. So I cut out a lot of people out of my life, and only those people who affirmed or agreed with me were allowed in, because I knew who I was, or I believed, I thought I knew who I was. But when I embraced the truth, I came to understand that there's all these underlying issues that need to be dealt with. There's rejection, abandonment, and abuse. And those, like I said previously, they are heavy hitting lies that come in there. A rejection, it trickles out through your life everywhere. So it's looking beyond what they're saying and understanding that what we're seeing is fruit of a deeper woundedness. There's unmet needs, legitimate needs that are in there that have gone unmet. And so now they're trying to, as adults, I know I was trying to figure out, how do I get this need met? How do I get that fulfillment of love? How do I get that nurturing that I never got from my mom because she couldn't give it, being, the victim of abuse? So it's continuing to look at those things. And rather than, transgenderism, in fact, the whole LGBTQ thing is, those are just behaviors. And again, there are things that represent there's deeper things going on underneath, and it's picking out through those things. Because once I worked through the rejection and I worked through the abandonment and I worked through the abuse and I got the truth in there, I wanted to go back, changing back, it was like, oh, I can do this, because they're all heart issues. It's it's an emotional issue. It's not a sexual issue. It's an emotional issue. And you're trying to get those emotional things fixed by finding, who I am in the deception. And the enemy is all too willing to tell you who you are, as long as it's marring the image of God. He's very willing to do that.
Kathy, we're speaking into KathyGrace Duncan about her story of living 11 years as a man before finding her identity in Christ and ultimately returning to identity as a woman. And KathyGrace, specifically today on the program, we're talking to parents who are increasingly finding themselves in this situation where their daughter will come to them and say, I'm really a boy. What would you say to a parent who surprisingly finds themselves in that situation?
Sure. So I think it's okay to tell your child, you know what, I need to catch up with you. You've just poured this on my lap, and I need time to kind of process this, because that transgender child has been dealing with that issue for a long time. And maybe they have just now gotten the courage to tell the parent. At the same time, the parent, you can't fix them. There's no fix to them. It's going after those root issues. And sometimes that takes time. You need to restore that relationship with them, because there's a point where that trust got broken. And I don't know what that point is, but there was something that happened where they're not going to open up to you. And if they are open to you, then press in and ask them questions like, why do you think being a boy is better? What's wrong with being a girl? What are those things that have been telling you that being who you are is not okay, that you need to be something else? Do you not feel safe? Also, figuring out where are they on the internet, because we have TikTok, we have Tumblr, we have Reddit. Though there's platforms out there in social media that's promoting this type of thing, and they tell that child, oh, so you're attracted to girls? Well, you're probably should be a boy. The agenda out there on the social media is really strong, and the kids listen to that, especially, in those ages between, 11 and 19, they're very vulnerable to social media. And so it's looking at where are they going on the internet? Who are their friends? What are their friends telling them? And looking at that and asking them about friendships and being blunt and saying, so, are you interested in somebody? Do you have a girlfriend that you're acting like a boy? And also going to the school and finding out what's being taught in school. That's another avenue where this lie as far as transgenderism is coming in. It's being taught in school. But again, it's coming and looking at this child and understanding that her wanting to be a boy or him wanting to be a girl is not the issue. That's the symptom. And so it's helping your child to figure out what is going on underneath, and counseling, finding a counselor in your area, or, there's counselors online too that deal with transgender issues, and understanding that there's something in your child, and if I can put it this way, that's broken, that's severely wounded, and they need help in sorting that out. It's also looking at their behaviors. Are they depressed? Do you know, are they cutting? That's a relief of stress. It's a relief, it helps them to relieve pain. So it's looking at, are their grades changing? Or did they suddenly start dressing differently? Are they asking for things that are more boy-like than girl-like? But again, you can't fix them, okay? And it's okay, parents, for you guys to have boundaries, saying, I'm not buying you testosterone. It's okay if you don't, bow to their demands, because this child could be very demanding. This is the pronoun I'm going to go by. This is the name I'm going to change it to. And these are the things you need to call me when you address me. And it's okay to tell them, I can't do that.
KathyGrace?
Yeah.
And to that point, and we've only got about a minute left for this one, but parents are often told that if you don't immediately agree with and support your child's identity, they're going to kill themselves. What's your response to that?
I would say challenge that. A lot of times that's emotional manipulation to get the parent to bow to that demand, to make them think that if you don't do this, then you don't find me worthy, so I'm just going to kill myself. We'll challenge that. In suicide prevention, they ask that person, so do you have a plan? If you're going to kill yourself, how are you going to carry that out? And be watchful of that, because sometimes it is a serious threat. But it's having that discernment, asking the Lord, is this real? How far do I need to be concerned about this? Because there is emotional manipulation behind that could be possible, that if you don't bow to this, then I will get you to bow to this by telling you this is what I'm going to do.
And KathyGrace, one final question in about 30 seconds. Where would you send a parent who might find themselves in this situation, wants to find some good advice where they can support their child but still defend the truth?
Sure. So the Change Movement is one of them, changemovement.com. There's also portlandfellowship.com. They have a Hope group that you can Zoom into, and that's going to be starting at the beginning of next year, so in January. And then there's Restored Hope Network that you can go on and look at if you're looking for a local ministry in your area. David Pickup is a great counselor, and I'm sure he could give a referral as far as other counselors that he knows, and maybe he would even take them as a client.
KathyGrace Duncan, thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.